Nestled in the Blue Ridge Mountains of upstate South Carolina, a beautiful city tucked on the banks of Lake Hartwell, which contains a deeper history with a dark past. Centered around John C. Calhoun, the enigmatic John C. Calhoun, owner and operator of a large plantation that is now home of the world-renowned Clemson University.
Fort Hill, also known as Clergy Hall, was built in 1803. Its first resident was John C. Calhoun, South Carolina's preeminent 19th century statesman from 1825 until his death in 1850. He served as the Vice President of the United States to Andrew Jackson and John Quincy Adams. He was also a senator from South Carolina, and he served as both Secretary of State and Secretary of War under Presidents Tyler Polk and James Monroe. John C. Calhoun married Florida Calhoun and had 6 kids named Patrick, John, James, William, Cornelia, and Anna Maria. Calhoun raised cotton as a cash crop on his plantation using enslaved African American labor to run his household plantation and household labor.
Calhoun was born in Abbeville to a slaveholding family and raised cotton as a cash crop, using enslaved African American labor to run his household and plantation. The Calhouns owned skilled workers such as gardeners, seamstresses, and carpenters, in addition to agricultural workers and field hands. Calhoun held a very racist view on slavery. He made an impassioned speech on the floor of the Senate, claiming slavery was not an evil but a positive good, and advocated for its expansion across the territories of the growing United States. When John C. Calhoun died, Fort Hill went to his wife, Florida Calhoun, and when she died, the property was divided between Anna Maria and her husband, Thomas Clemson, and their daughter, Florida Elizabeth.
Now entering the parlor, which is where the Calhouns would entertain their guest. Since John C. Calhoun worked in the political sphere, serving as a dignitary as well as an important figure in the office of the President of the United States on the national government, he hosted a multitude of politicians and foreign dignitaries. Also seen here are busts of John C. Calhoun and Thomas Green Clemson. These, in addition to the paintings and lavish decorations shown by the elegant wallpapers on the walls, show how wealthy plantation owners became using the forced labor of African Americans.
Following up the stairs, we begin with the southeast bedroom that was originally Andrew Pickens Calhoun's room. He was the firstborn son of John C. Calhoun and married his second wife, Margaret Green, on May 5th, 1836, and they had 7 children. In 1854, he bought part of Fort Hill and 50 slaves from his mother. When he died, there were around 127 field slaves and 12 servants or skilled workers working at Fort Hill. His death made Fort Hill a house of mourning and sickness when the Union troops came through Pendleton. Andrew and Margaret lost a child, and several slaves lost their lives to the same illness.
Now we enter into the northeast corner bedroom, which was used by Patrick Calhoun's, John C.'s second son. He graduated from West Point and served as a major in the United States Army. Patrick never married and ended up dying from a lingering illness on June 1, 1858. The oil painting of Madonna and Child hangs over the mantel in this room was painted by Thomas Green Clemson. He used his wife, Anna, and their daughter, Nina, as his role models.
Now entering Anna Maria Calhoun's childhood bedroom, and which was later used by the Clemsons as newlyweds, who initially lived there from 1840 to 1843, after escaping Philadelphia's cold weather. During this time, Mr. Calhoun fostered Mr. Clemson's interest in scientific agriculture. The Clemsons' first 3 children were born at Fort Hill before the couple and their 2 surviving children moved to Canebrake Plantation in Saluda. Thomas Clemson purchased Canebrake Plantation and 30 African-American slaves from his wife's uncle before they moved to Canebrake in January 1844. Soon the Clemsons would travel to Europe, where they resided for 6 years, while Mr. Clemson served in his diplomatic post as the charge d'affaires in Belgium.
Next is the northeast center bedroom, which belonged to Calhoun's third son, John C. Calhoun, Jr. He attended the University of Virginia in Charlottesville and became a physician and learned how to use the early medical instruments such as cupping cups for bleeding and syringes. John married his second wife, Kate Kirby Putnam, and they had 2 children together. This room also contained pieces of Mr. Clemson's art collection that reflect his interest in agriculture. Now we enter into the hallway dressing room. The dressing rooms were primarily used for grooming and bathing needs of the family, but they also served as storage areas because of the lack of closet space. The English ironstone foot tub with lotus petal design was Mrs. Calhoun's, and the Sheraton-style washstand belonged to the Clemsons. The African-American house slaves would have maintained the dressing rooms by emptying the chamber pots, bringing heated water into the house, removing wastewater, and providing for other needs of the family members, and were on call day and night. Household slaves numbered 6 individuals, 5 female and 1 male.
The dressing room features a metal semi-reclining sitz washtub, which belonged to the Calhouns. The washtub with the wide flange for sitting that was called a hat bathtub that belonged to the Clemsons for taking showers, and wide sides for guttering water into the center, and the tin pitcher, which was used for pouring water. This dressing room was also used as a storage space and holds Dr. John C. Calhoun Jr.'s black mahogany medicine chest on the shelf, and the dome trunk, which belonged to Thomas Green Clemson, and features his initials formed the metal tacks on the top. The wooden pine box belonged to John C. Calhoun and features his initials also. Before moving to Fort Hill, the Calhoun family would travel back and forth to Washington from the family's Bath plantation in Abbeville, South Carolina. So they used this room to store luggage that would have been used to carry a 6-month supply of books, clothing, and other necessities back and forth to Washington, D.C. The next bedroom belonged to Calhoun's 4th son, James Edward Calhoun. James attended Erskine College and later studied law, but he eventually went to California to seek his fortune. When he moved to California, he tragically died and left no heir. His room is the only room in the house that does not have a fireplace because it was originally the dressing room. The artwork that hangs around the room are part of Thomas Green Clemson's art collection that was acquired when he went to Belgium. Susan Clemson, an African-American slave, was given from the Calhouns to the Clemsons and was Mr. Clemson's first slave. She slept on the floor on a pallet most nights, with a string tied to her wrist with the other end attached to the Clemson's bed. Now entering Cornelia Martha Calhoun's bedroom, which was Calhoun's last daughter. As a young child, she fell from a swing, hindering her ability to walk. Some contemporary sources note that she had difficulty hearing, which forced her to use an ear trumpet. Despite all the medical procedures, her health never improved, and she ended up not getting married. Izzy was Cornelia's slave companion, but was sent away when she attempted to burn down the house. There is a 3-sided crib that was rolled up to the side of Mr. and Mrs. Calhoun's bed and was used by all the Calhoun children. The round end table that is located beside the bed was at John C. Calhoun's bedside when he died in Washington, D.C.
Now we enter into the main office, which also is now the modern-day trophy case, which housed many of the artifacts that belonged to the Calhouns and the Clemsons, including presidential pictures of James Tyler. It also contained the appointment letter that appointed John C. Calhoun to Secretary of State. These artifacts, among many others, including Belgian medals from their time as ambassadors to Belgium, showed how the Calhoun accumulated wealth and prestige from their positions in federal office.
Get that? Yeah, I got that. Got that.
Contrary to modern design, kitchens of the 19th century plantations were located in their own building outside of the main house. The mannequin in front of the fireplace depicts what the average slave that worked on the plantation would have worn. Located in the corner of the kitchen is a cabinet that a carpenter slave built. The Calhouns owned skilled workers such as gardeners, seamstresses, and carpenters, in addition to agricultural workers and field hands. Other Calhoun slaves were also allowed to plant cotton in patches conveniently located near the quarters so they could cultivate them after their work was done.
Now we enter into John C. Calhoun's office. It served as both Calhoun's office and library. On July 26, 1831, while serving as the Vice President of the United States under President Andrew Jackson, Calhoun wrote his doctrine of nullification and states' rights, known as the Fort Hill Address. He handled all business related to his over 100 African American slaves, his overseers, and cotton plantation. The desk was Calhoun's United States Representative's desk, from where he gave his first speech in Washington, D.C., explaining why the United States needed to go to war against Great Britain for the second time. Following his time as a young war hawk, Calhoun was appointed to serve as Secretary of War before being elected to the office of Vice President of the United States under John Quincy Adams in 1825. His desk chair was made out of horsehair, and the bookshelf has the 18-volume set of the Encyclopedia Britannica. The large maps framed around the room were Calhoun's, depicting the Missouri Territory of 1820, the United States in 1846, and the districts of the state of South Carolina and Louisiana plantations. There were only 2 windows, and all other lighting would have come from candles or oil lamps.
Located 1/8 mile from the main house, the Fort Hill slave quarters, which has been turned into dorm rooms for students called the shoe boxes, were described in 1849 as being built of stone and joined together like barracks, with gardens attached. Some 70 to 80 enslaved African Americans then lived at Fort Hill. In 1854, Andrew P. Calhoun moved to Fort Hill from Alabama with his property, including slaves. At his death in 1865, the plantation included 139 enslaved African Americans. Somewhere on this side of the plantation house, sloping downhill toward Death Valley, was a smokehouse, a laundry, domestic slave quarters, privies, and wells.
Now you see Death Valley. Somewhere on this side of the plantation house, sloping towards Death Valley, was a smokehouse, a laundry, domestic slave quarters, privies, and wells. There was also a spinning house, a weaving room, and further down the hill, the dorms commonly called the shoe boxes were slave quarters. Death Valley has since been converted into one of the largest football stadiums in the country. It now stands as a testament to the progress the country has made in civil rights and individual opportunity. In the same place where so many African Americans toiled and were robbed of the fruits of their labor, now young African American men can make, in the same piece of land, have the chance to become campus legends and go on to make millions of dollars as a professional athlete, a position thought to be impossible not too long ago. Employees must have worked at the university for a minimum of 20 years. They must have held a full-time position. All persons who have served as Clemson University president for the institution are immediately eligible for burial at Woodland Cemetery, regardless of how long they are president for. All past and current board members of the Board of Trustees are eligible for interment at the cemetery. The spouse of an eligible person can be interred at the cemetery. It includes a widow or widower of an eligible person if the eligible person has been interred at the cemetery.
The Woodland Cemetery is where the African Americans that were enslaved at Fort Hill were buried, along the hillside below the Calhoun family plot in graves marked only by fieldstones. The exact number of burials is unknown. Beginning in 1890, Clemson College leased prisoners, primarily African Americans, from the state to construct campus buildings. Until 1915, those who died during their incarceration were buried adjacent to the slave cemetery. Clemson University's Woodland Cemetery began as statesman John C. Calhoun's first hill plantation graveyard. Early maps show the hillside had been once an orchard. The first known burial was a child, also named John C. Calhoun, who died in 1837. Clemson College laid out the present cemetery in 1924 as a graveyard for faculty and staff. Many prominent Clemson University leaders are buried here. The burial plots are given as they are available. The university makes no guarantee of eligibility, space, or location at Woodland Cemetery. The board has the right to turn down a request, regardless if the individual meets all the requirements, which differ based on duties at the university.
Alright, it's early Monday morning. Just finished the captions. Just want to make some credits real quick. Shout out to Karen, Carter, and Pearson for great work on the group project. We all worked together real well. Shout out to all of them. Shout out to the woman who gave us a tour at Fort Hill. She was very informative. And that's it really. Thanks for watching.